Ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Gale Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, and I want to say good evening to everyone who's very concerned, as we are, about small business in the city of New York. And I want to thank Columbia University, the Harlem SBDC, and all of our panelists whom I will interview in a moment and make sure that you know who they are. This is a very special topic. As the Borough President of Manhattan, we are swamped with calls from small business. And I want to thank these panelists immensely for making time to try to answer some of your questions. Our very first panelist is a very special commissioner of New York City's small business, and it is a department of small business services. He has done a phenomenal job in the past and currently. He is born in Grenada, raised in Brooklyn, and prior to his many years at SBS, he was the senior manager of workforce development at NPower. He was director of web operations at Oxygen Media. He was at TheStreet.com, and he began his career at Vibe magazine. He has a master's degree in integrated marketing and management from Florida State University and BS in business administration from Florida A&M University. And he also is a graduate of Kennedy School at Harvard, senior executives in state and local government program. Commissioner Bishop, thank you very much for joining us. What we're going to do is have you give opening remarks, and then we'll go through the panel, and then we'll have questions. And I very much appreciate taking time from your very busy schedule, because I know how busy it is. Commissioner, go ahead and thank you.
Well, thank you, Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, for hosting me. And it's always a pleasure working alongside with you. And of course, good evening, everyone. Apologize that I'm not on video. My name is Gregg Bishop. I'm as Gale said, I'm the Commissioner of New York City Department of Small Business Services. And I'm very grateful not only to the Borough President, but to Columbia University. It's good to see Andrew Rigie from the New York City Hospitality Alliance. And of course, all my good friends, Jessica Walker from the Manhattan Chamber, and Quenia Brew, and Kaaryn, and everyone that's been working really close to support our business community. I hope that everyone is finding themselves and their families well and in good health. And of course, I just want to thank everyone for doing your part in flattening the curve and staying home and staying inside and only going out for essential needs. We have seen our hospitals continue to deal with the onslaught of COVID-19, and we just want to take a moment to thank all our first responders who are out there doing a terrific job in terms of helping our fellow New Yorkers. It's clearly a painful time for our city and our world, and this disease's impact to so many dimensions of our lives. Before I go into the business programs and support, I just want to make a special plug to amplify the city's Grab and Go program that has been expanded for all New Yorkers. So in this time where we're seeing historic unemployment, we understand that more New Yorkers are experiencing food insecurity, and just want you to know that this program, no one is turned away regardless of age, and participants can pick up 3 meals per day. To find a location near your home, text NYC Food or Comida to 877-877. So that's NYC Food or Comida to 877-877 in order to find out where you can get a meal. So our agency, we're responsible for the city's small businesses. And as you know, every small business has been hit particularly hard. There's a lot of pain, and a lot of workers are feeling the impact of this pandemic. And we've been doing a lot in terms of how we can help our small businesses. I just want to thank our partners on the federal level, because this pandemic and the need has been so great that it did require a federal response. And the CARES Act, which is tasking the SBA in terms of overseeing the distribution of millions of dollars in loans and grants to small businesses, is the solution, and one of the things that we've been excited to partner with our SBDC partners and the SBA in terms of how do we get our small businesses connected to that federal support. The programs that we launched early on was to address the challenges that we saw with businesses that were impacted early on in February and January. And as you know, in March, the tables turned and everyone was impacted. So there are some programs that we have launched and we've seen sunset. We continue to pivot over to help individuals connect to the SBA programs. And certainly we'll be happy to talk to you about those and how we are working closely with our partners in the SBDC. The NYC Employee Retention Grant, we have stopped accepting applications since Friday, April 3rd. If you have applied, we are in the process of going through. We've already distributed over almost close to $10 million in subsidies across the city. And we had a huge amount of applications submitted at the very last minute. So we continue to go through and review those applications. I want to make clear that we are very concerned about our ability to respond in a timely manner. Our team has been working around the clock to be as responsive as possible, but we do have an enormous amount of volume. And I think one of the frustrating things that most small businesses are experiencing, whether it's with us or with lenders or with the federal government, is just the magnitude of assistance that people need have overwhelmed our normal communication challenges. So we continue to try to be as responsive as possible. But if you are trying to get a status, the best thing that you can do is send an email to covid19biz@sbs.nyc.gov, and someone will attempt to get in touch with you in about a week or two. We also encourage individuals, and we are working closely because we have sunset that program with the SBA to pivot individuals to the Paycheck Protection Program. I know my colleague will just give you a high-level overview of those programs, but during the question and answer, if you have specific questions, happy to answer those in terms of where to find lenders and who's participating. But if you have a business account with a bank, that is the best way to actually the only way that you can apply, and we encourage you to do that. Our business solution centers are operating remotely. So if you need assistance in terms of understanding how to apply to any of these programs, what documentation is necessary, you can go to our website, nyc.gov/COVID19biz. So that's nyc.gov/COVID19biz to get and request assistance from our business solution centers. We are offering assistance in different languages, and that is your one-stop shop for all types of information, not only on the SBA's program, but also on local philanthropic financing, on guidance from the state and the city in terms of how to run your business. That is your source for information. Another area that I've heard from is rent challenges. And of course, I wanted to let you know that we do have some assistance there. So if you are a business owner and you're facing financial pressure, and you have an individual lease, we want to make sure that you know that we are providing free legal assistance for you to sit down with an attorney, review your lease, determine your rights and obligations, and of course, help negotiate a payment plan for arrears. You can visit nyc.gov/comlease. It's important to know that there is a moratorium on evictions. I know for sure that, we've talked about this, as we think about restarting the economy, we want to make sure that we do have a long runway for you to actually figure out how to now manage if you are not able to pay your rent, how to spread out those payments so it's manageable. And that we think will require some assistance. We've been lobbying on the federal level for additional stimulus. We do not think, and I do not think, that this is going to be something that businesses will be opening up in June. I think it's going to be a gradual, for consumers to come out and support businesses, it's going to be a gradual ramp up. So therefore, we're going to need to be with you for the long haul, for the long term, which I'm assuming will be the rest of 2020. So we will be advocating on the federal level to continue the level of support that we're seeing to help businesses as they continue to ramp up. Additionally, our partners at the City Bar recently launched a new initiative via the City Justice Center's Neighborhood Entrepreneur Law Project to assist small businesses impacted by COVID-19 as it relates to navigating insurance-related claims. This is very important because we want to make sure that if you have business interruption insurance, that you talk to an attorney before you talk to your insurance company. We are lobbying on the federal level for this to be a covered event, and I know Andrew and I have had conversations about this. We've seen precedents in 9/11 where the federal government created a fund for insurance companies to pay out. We want to see something like that. Of course, it's a nationwide challenge, but we are advocating for some type of insurance relief. So if you, in the meantime, want to file a claim with your insurance company, please talk to an attorney. This service is available for free. You can either come to our website or you can call NELP at 212-382-6633 or email nelp@citybar.org, and they'll connect you to an attorney. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing all the different support that my partners are going to be talking about, and then looking forward to answering your questions. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being so available and so knowledgeable during this horrific crisis. It means a lot. Our second panelist is also very special. Andrew Rigie is Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. He is from Queens. He was born into the hospitality business, working at his family's third-generation bakery in Queens. And he then went on and worked for the Restaurant Association, but maybe got too tired there and wanted to do even more. And he has started something so special that has made a huge positive impact. As I indicated, it's the New York City Hospitality Alliance. It was started in 2012, and he's the executive director. And to be honest with you, his level-headedness and his intelligence about the industry has provided much, much support for this amazing sector. He's also on many boards. He is chair of the New York City's Office of Nightlife, of their advisory board. He's also vice chair of Community Board number 7 in Manhattan. And he is very much involved writing and an author of many, many publications on the topic. So he did his went to Hunter College, and he has certainly been a graduate of the Institute of Culinary Education in Manhattan. He also put out, even before this wonderful, horrible experience, not a wonderful experience, he put out a wonderful NYC Hospitality Alliance 20 policy ideas for 2020, even before this horrific virus hit the world. And this is an example, I think, of somebody thinking ahead, but more importantly, I hope you'll talk a little bit, Andrew, not only about what you're doing now, but as you have, what recovery could look like, and some of the ways in which your policy paper could perhaps be of assistance in any recovery. Thank you very much for joining us.
Wow, that was incredibly generous. And I am also a Gale Brewer groupie, as so many of us are.
Never mind.
First, just hello, everyone. Listen, this has been an absolutely devastating time for the world, our nation, New York City, and especially the businesses, the restaurants, bars, and nightclubs that my organization represents. It's going to be an incredibly difficult and challenging long road to recovery, but we will do it together. Listen, I keep saying it, if you've been on these other town halls, that I do not believe the rest of the nation's economy or New York City's economy will recover unless our restaurant and nightlife industry is at the core of that recovery. Now, through the Hospitality Alliance, we have been issuing memos and alerts multiple times a day over the past few weeks, letting business owners know all of their obligations under the law, from labor law to food safety to the different resources being made by agencies like the Department of Small Business Services under Commissioner Bishop's leadership. And making sure you have that information, because when there are times of uncertainty, people want some sort of certainty, and they want whatever information they can get their hands on. So you can go to our website, thenycalliance.org, thenycalliance.org. You can sign up and get up-to-date alerts about things that people in the hospitality industry need to know about, and also ways to interact and engage with your elected leaders to make sure that our voice is heard, because we need our narrative and our experience to help guide the recovery. So I know there's a lot of questions, we may get to them a little bit later, but there's a few things that I know are on the top of people's minds. One is the Paycheck Protection Program, which I know you'll hear a little bit about. Very well intended. The SBA has been working, I know, around the clock trying to help administer this program. However, we are speaking to our elected leaders in the US Senate, in Congress, as well in the White House, and saying this PPP program must be amended in the fourth stimulus in a few different ways so it can better address the needs of the restaurant and nightlife community. One, we need the forgivable loan to be forgivable, not if it's you hire back all your staff by the end of June, but by the end of the year. We know, or I should say, we don't know when restaurants are going to be able to open again. So for many of you, it makes no sense to reopen your business or hire everyone back before you're not even reopened, only to then have to lay people off again because you're not allowed to open up or because business is going to be very slow at the beginning. You know, as was mentioned earlier, we probably won't have the same amount of tourists. People have lost their jobs, so they're not going to have as much disposable income. We're not sure how consumer purchasing behavior is going to be. Are people going to want to stand 5 deep at a bar to get a beer? Are they going to want to sit at a communal table when the host walks over and hands you your menu? Are you going to take it? So there's all these things we don't know yet. So we need the PPP's loan forgiveness to be forgiven if you hire back your staff by the end of the year, not by the end of June. That's one. Also, the PPP only allows for 75% of the loan to go to labor costs and then 25% to rent, utilities, and other expenses. Now, we all know in New York City, there's a very high price for commercial real estate here, and 25% probably will not be enough to cover those expenses, particularly if you're closed for a few months. So we want the percentage of money from that loan that can be converted into a grant to be higher for rent. So we're saying increase the 25% rent and utility threshold and extend the forgivable period from June 30th to the end of the year. We think that will better allow businesses to adjust their staffing levels to meet customer demand and your business operations, as well as have more money to spend towards rent and other expenses that you really need. So those are two things that we're focusing on. The other is I'm involved with a national group called the Business Interruption Group. And we're trying to address a lot of the insurance policies that business owners have. You've been paying your business interruption insurance, and now you go to file a claim and you're getting denied from the insurance company. Now there's variations in what every policy says, so I won't get into all those nuances now, but we have a goal to have business interruption insurance paid out to small businesses who are paying it. We are all in this together. And as I said, if our restaurant and nightlife economy does not get back on track, the rest of the economy won't. So whether you're in real estate or insurance or restaurants or government, this is a time we all need to come together and do the best things we possibly can for the city as a whole. And that is going to include amending PPP, paying out business interruption claims, and then continuing to work with the Small Business Services and Gale and all of our elected leaders to make sure that the policies that are put in place make sense for our industry. So I'll leave it there. I want to thank the Manhattan Borough President and everyone else for doing this call, and happy to take some questions later on.
CEO of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, where she has been an amazing leader, bringing together small businesses for the entire borough in very, very creative and inspirational ways. Previously, she was Vice President for Government Affairs at the Partnership for New York City, representing the corporate and business leaders in our city. She serves on the Board of Directors of United Neighborhood Houses, known as UNH, and she's a member of Governor Cuomo's Regional Economic Development Council, known as REDC. She was born in Detroit, raised on the Navajo Indian Reservation in New Mexico, went to Princeton University, and is now a proud resident of Harlem, which makes me very happy. Jessica, thank you for joining us. Please feel free to discuss all the amazing things that you're working on.
Well, thank you so much. listen, with everything that we're going through, I think the bright light here is that we have such terrific advocates. Thank you, Madam Borough President. Gregg Bishop is fantastic. Andrew, we work together quite a bit. With everything that's happening, we are all working together to try to get things moving and really trying to advocate for small businesses right now. So I am the head of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. We are a organization that represents and supports businesses across the borough. Primarily, I would say most of our members are small businesses in various industries. And of course, many of them are hurting right now. There's no question about it. When this happened, when the crisis started, we always had a helpline to try to help businesses deal with any question they had, legal issues, immigration issues, and we would put them in touch with an expert. But when this happened, when the crisis started, we opened that help desk to any business in need throughout the city, knowing that everybody was going through so much. And I have to tell you, we have really been inundated. There's just such a need out there right now. As you can imagine, cash flow is the biggest issue. It's not rocket science. Right now, most businesses are closed. There's no income coming in, but bills are still due. And so we've been trying to really try to put people in contact with the sources of revenue, loans, and grants that are available. Andrew spoke a little bit about the federal PPP program, which is a lifeline for many right now, but there certainly could be some fixes. And I'm happy to speak more about that as questions come in. The other thing, of course, is just confusion. There's a lot of noise right now. Everybody is doing, is putting out as much information as they can, but because things are so fast moving with different government guidance, with these new programs that are popping up, it's very difficult to know exactly what you need to do and to make sure that you have the best information. So that's why webinars like this with very credible elected officials, bringing the right people on, including Gregg Bishop and some of these other panelists, I think are so important. So I do hope that everybody here today is going to get the answers that they need, and we're of course happy to help with that. Just so you know, our chamber is doing a lot. Like I said, we have the help desk, which if you have questions after, hopefully we're gonna answer all your questions today, but if you have additional questions, everyone is welcome to reach out to our help desk. And we'll put you in touch with the appropriate expert. Sometimes it's help through the Small Business Services Department. Sometimes it's putting you in touch with a lawyer, but we will try to get you the information that you need. And I will put the way to contact our help desk in the chat for everybody to see. But I'll stop there. And again, I'm happy to participate and answer all the questions that I'm sure the small businesses on the line have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Our next panelist is Quenia Abreu, President and CEO of the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. I know her because her amazing dedication to empowering and fostering the economic development of women and people of color is well known in our city, not just in Washington Heights, where she spends a lot of time, but throughout the entire borough. She founded it in 2002, and it was greatly appreciated that this group of people has a voice. She provides technical assistance to more than 10,000 people. She also spearheaded, even before the creation of the first Women and Minority Business Development Center in Upper Manhattan, primarily Washington Heights. She served previously as director at the Queens Economic Development Corporation and the Hunts Point Economic Development Women's Business Centers, both of which were funded by the SBA. She worked previously for Columbia University many years ago, where she started an office and became the associate director of recruiting and placement. And she was the youngest Latina female executive in the history of that institution. Thank you very much, Quenia. I appreciate all the work you do. Please join us.
Thank you, Gale. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so needed. And, we are experiencing a time that we have never experienced before. As my heart bleeds at this moment in time for everything that is happening to our beautiful, loving city that we love so much, for the families that, the people that we lost, the people that are sick, and for our small businesses. We at the New York Women's Chamber work primarily with women entrepreneurs, as you know, and one of the groups that we deal heavily with involved is the beauty salons. As you know, we have a lot of beauty salons, especially in the Washington Heights area, and not only there, but also around the city. And they're all closed. They're all closed. All of our barbershop, all of our beauty salons, most of our small businesses are closed. I think that probably 90% of or more of them are currently closed. And what we're seeing is, there's how scared they are, how they don't know what they're going to do. I'm very concerned about the beauty salons, to be honest with you, because it is a business that relies heavily on social interaction, and it's going to take some time, even after this, for them to get back on their feet. So I'll tell you what we have been doing to help out at this moment in time. We have been partnering with the Hispanic Federation at this moment in time, Columbia University, not Columbia, Columbia Presbyterian Hospital created a fund for small businesses in Northern Manhattan, and we are so thankful for that. It was something that was done with Congressman Adriano Espaillat, and the fund is managed by the Hispanic Federation. And the hospital put in $10 million to help the small businesses located in Washington Heights, Inwood, Marble Hill, and Hamilton Heights. And $2 million are currently being dispersed, being given to the small businesses to help them out at this moment in time. It's an emergency fund that they don't have to give back. And that's what we need at this moment in time. I love the fact that the SBA, it's there and it's needed. But when I look at some of the businesses, Gale, that we deal with, a lot of them, my concern is that they might not even qualify for the SBA loan, and that they're going to be left out in the cold. And we need to make sure that they're going to survive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're completed?
Yes. So what I want to say is that we are a partner of the Federation in doing this, and anybody that is interested in applying can contact us. We have been working very closely with a lot of the businesses in helping them fill out an application, and the money is being given out as we speak. It's not a complicated application, which is another thing that I want to say. We need to look for programs and create programs that the applications are not so hard and difficult to complete. So right now, we have been, very fortunate to have the Hispanic Federation involved in putting out an application that is not that difficult, and the turnaround time is very quick, which is what we need.
Congratulations, and luckily you're there to make it all happen. So our next panelist is Kaaryn Simmons, Director of the Columbia-Harlem Small Business Development Center, which is actually the sponsor of this wonderful program. She works to promote economic development, empowerment, and job creation in the Harlem community. She leads workshop in the basics of starting and growing a business, and teaches in the Columbia Community Business Program, which is a 2-year curriculum that meets weekly to support local managers and owners. And it focuses on stabilizing a business and then growing it. Goodness knows we're going to need that in recovery. This Columbia-Harlem SBDC also offers one-on-one business counseling and programs in marketing, communication skills, video storytelling, so that owners can promote their products and services to investors and on social media. All services are free, funded by Columbia Business School, the Small Business Administration, and some corporate foundations. Thank you very much, Kaaryn, for being with us, and we'd love to hear from you.
So much. As Borough President Brewer mentioned, my name is Kaaryn Simmons. I'm the director of the Columbia-Harlem Small Business Development Center. We are a center of Columbia Business School, providing now virtual training and one-to-one counseling to entrepreneurs and small business owners operating businesses in Upper Manhattan. We're part of a network of 24 centers in New York State and over 900 centers in the United States, funded in part by our resource partner, the U.S. Small Business Administration. Sorry, I'm just taking a moment. Everyone's applauding because it's 7 o'clock. So I'm going to do the same. We differ from the SBA in a few different ways. Our center provides webinars on resources and strategies for emergency loan and grant programs, business survival, starting a new business. We also offer one-to-one assistance in applying for financing, survival strategies, financial management, marketing, unwinding a business, and starting a new business. Another thing that we do is we really are focused now on finding connections to other resources to help your business and your employees and finding the answers to the questions of today. What we don't do, which separates us from some other organizations, we don't provide funding of any kind. We don't do loans, we don't do grants, we don't have any equity investments, but we are able to help identify opportunities. This is different from our SBA partner, which does offer emergency loan programs, including the Payroll Protection Program loan guarantees, the Economic Injury Disaster loans, and the Express Bridge loans, as well as other financing programs. They do not provide individual assistance in applying for financing or provide individual and management advice. We do provide that assistance to apply for the financing, but we do not actually evaluate the funding request or decide on the amount of funding that businesses will receive. I'm going to give just a broad overview of the two loans that everyone's talking about right now, or the two programs that the SBA is offering as part of the CARES Act, and that all of the SBDCs are being referred to as resource partners to assist small businesses with gathering their documents and submitting them for the loans. The first is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which is designed for businesses that need working capital for, I believe it's for about 6 months right now is the last thing I heard. No collateral is needed for loans of under $25,000. I was just told that that actually has adjusted to $200,000. So no collateral for loans under $200,000. Over that amount, between $200,000 and $2 million, the SBA will take the best lien available, excluding real estate. Forgiveness for that loan, there is an advance that's part of that loan. It's supposed to be available very soon after applying. The advance is for up to $10,000, and it is forgiven. It's forgivable. That $10,000 is dependent on the number of employees that you have. So it's $1,000 per employee, which is new guidance that was just received. The terms of that program are the interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses for 30 years, a 30-year fixed rate, I'm sorry, and 2.75% for nonprofits. Those payments are deferred for the first 12 months. Eligible entities for that loan program are sole proprietors, LLCs, corporations, agricultural co-ops, and aquaculture, as well as private nonprofits. For that loan, you apply directly to the SBA. It's sba.gov/disaster. And that loan is, the payments are being made directly from the Treasury Department. Just want to make a note, all of this information is on the SBDC website, as well as we have webinars, step-by-step instructions for completing the forms, and all of the forms as well. The other program that everyone's been very excited about is the Payroll Protection Program. That program is specifically for payroll, plus an additional 25% of operating. There is no collateral required. The forgiveness for that program is up to 100% if certain requirements are met. And you've heard a little bit about those requirements, specifically around payroll and maintaining not only the staff that are that you have at inception of the loan, but also their salary levels. So if anyone leaves, they have to be replaced pretty much immediately at the same salary level. The amount is 2.5 times the monthly payroll for the prior 12 months. So the loan amount may be small depending on what size business you have. It's really only for 2 months of payroll plus another thing. I'm sorry, for the portion of the loan that is not forgiven, there is a 1% interest rate, and it is for 2 years. And for that program, the payments are deferred for 6 months. Eligible entities include all for-profits, including gig workers, sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, as well as private nonprofits. That is the loan program that actually is going through SBA approved banks. And we maintain a list of SBA approved banks on our website. As Gregg mentioned, if you are already banking, if you have an account with an SBA approved lender, we suggest that you go directly to that lender. If you don't, we have some additional lenders on our website, and you can learn more about everything on our website.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Okay, in terms of the question, there's an awful lot, as you can imagine, about coming into the chat room about how long does it take once you get approved. And I think they mean on almost any grant, either the PPP or the first one that you mentioned, or maybe even some of the SBS grants. I know that the commissioner talked about some of the challenges of just being overwhelmed. So the issue is, number one, how long on any of these grants does it take? People also wanted to know if nonprofits can apply, and did that include labor unions? I know it depends on whether you're a 501c3 or 4, maybe that is something that has come up in the past. And they wanted to know also if in fact a business doesn't qualify for SBS or SBA, are there any other options available? So that's kind of the realm of some of the chat rooms, and then we can go into many other questions.
Okay. So I guess I could start with SBS and let you know what we saw at the beginning and where we're at right now. For the grants, we are going through, as I mentioned, we've already dispersed about $10 million. We have additional applications. I think we received about 4,000 in one day on that Friday. So we are going through those applications. We expect to have decisions in the next couple weeks or so. It is really difficult for us to estimate in terms of timing. The best thing that you can do is send an email to covid19biz@sbs.nyc.gov. We have attempted, when you applied, you created an account on our portal. The portal will tell you whether we received the application, but it won't tell you anything more than that. And we are attempting to move as quickly as possible to communicate with you. The loan program, when we first started, we saw from pre-application to application to underwriting to disbursement, the whole process takes a week. But again, because we received over 16,000 applications, we're now processing them on a first come, first served basis, which is why we had to temporarily pause that program. The ability to give you a time is based on how quickly individuals respond to the lender, et cetera. So all I can say right now is that if you can send an email, if you are applying to our program, you should also apply to the other SBA programs. You just have to make sure you don't use the funds for the same thing. And that has been our suggestion for a lot of businesses.
In terms of the federal?
So what we're seeing for the IEDL is that approvals have been coming through, and even the advances are starting to come through. What we are seeing, and I think there was a message about this that went out yesterday or the day before, was that the IEDL, which is really the working capital program, which is supposed to be working capital for 6 months, up to 2 million, that it's currently capped at $15,000. So the applications are going in, people are being approved, but because there's such a high demand for this project, in order to kind of spread it out, people are getting the initial $15,000 as the approved loan amount, but they are also getting the $10,000 or up to $10,000 of the advance. So altogether, kind of the max for right now might be $25,000, but I think that's with the expectation that there will be future funding going into that program. For PPP, so for EIDL, I think we were looking at about 2 weeks. We had a client who applied, they were number 900. And they told us, and they applied on March 23rd. They told us last Monday that they got the approval, and I believe the money was actually dispersed last week to them. For PPPL, which started last Friday, a Brooklyn client, actually, or a client of the Brooklyn Center, did receive their approval today for over $200,000 from Key Bank. So it took about a week for that to go through with that particular bank.
Okay, thank you very much. Andrew, I know you're doing a lot of lobbying with some of the national organizations. So there are a couple of questions like, will this be enough money in the stimulus bill to go around? I think the answer is no, but what are we looking for if we had our druthers in the fourth stimulus? And then the other question was, there are lots of businesses that don't fit in. I know they're over 500, and you may have some others. I just wanted to sort of get a sense of who's not covered. And then finally, there are questions about employees that have H-1B visas. I don't think they can they file for unemployment, or is there something that federally can be done for them, if anything? So it's those kinds of sort of advocacy questions.
So as far as the money goes, last week there was a lot of discussion about adding an additional about $250 billion to the however many billions of dollars they initially allocated for the PPP. My understanding was it kind of hit a roadblock, but there's still conversations going on. Many of the national groups are also advocating for an increase of the 2.5 times monthly payroll. Some say 3, some say 3.5%. Again, there's a lot to happen between now and perhaps the end of April, when we hope to see a fourth stimulus. So I do hope that more money will get allocated to it. I know a lot of restaurants, for example, didn't know when they should apply because they're saying we're not allowed to be open. We don't know when we're going to be able to open up. So they're concerned that if they don't apply now, they're going to miss out on the money altogether. So that's a legitimate concern. Unfortunately, there's not a concrete answer right now, other than we're recommending people speak with whomever you need to speak with, but start applying if you haven't yet. And hopefully more monies will be allocated. Hopefully it will even be a larger percent. Hopefully it will be allowed to have more of the money go towards rent, and you'll have a longer time to hire back all of your staff. We would like it to be by the end of the year. Currently, as I said before, you need to get back to staffing levels by the end of June. So those are all things that, again, none of them are set in stone. Those are many of the kind of national conversations. That's what the Hospitality Alliance is fighting for, among many other initiatives. As far as the different types of groups that are not eligible, this actually one is a little bit personal as well, because 501c6 not-for-profit associations like Hospitality Alliance, a Chamber of Commerce, and others are actually excluded from the PPP. 501c3 organizations, which are more like charities, they are eligible. There's conversation again. We're advocating to allow 501c6 organizations in. Speaking for myself, and I don't want to put words in Jessica's mouth, but other businesses, our restaurant members are closed. So we have suspended collection of membership dues. And these types of organizations, not just in New York, but around the country, play a vital role in connecting the small business community to government. We really are that conduit. So we need to be able to sustain our staffing levels as much as everyone. And I'd say our role right now is more important than ever because we can help be that voice for small business and unite them. There are other questions, and I'm not going to get into it because I'm not as familiar with it, but to do with independent contractors, or if you are a business owner and you're closed, if you are eligible for any of the money, if you're drawing a salary. So there are some of those more complex issues. I'll let the experts kind of touch on those. And then, sorry, the third question was, or did I?
Well, just about the H1
Yes.
employee. I don't know if you know the answer, but that does come up, H1B visas.
So I've spoken with several of our members that did have some chefs on these visas, and many of them, I believe, are going home. And that is exacerbating their concern because even if they're able to open the restaurant in June or July, they're not going to have the cooks that have the experience to prepare specific types of cuisines. So that is a big concern for them. I know, again, there have been some conversations, in Congress and as well about that, but I'm not aware of, an exact issue. And the final thing I'd also say, for certain industries is that those that are undocumented are unable to file for unemployment insurance. That's another significant issue in the city of New York. I say, immigrants are the backbone of our industry. We really need to be able to support every single person in New York, every single way we can. And goes back to my earlier statements that these concerns are being communicated, but we all need to make sure, and that means everyone that's watching or listening, that you get in contact with the powers that be, your city council members, your senators, assembly members, Congress members, you name it, and let them know that we want, because this is, like I said, we need to be at the core of this recovery. And these are all important questions. And many of them, unfortunately, have been yet to be answered. But hopefully,
I know, Kenya, I know that the commissioner, to his credit, has said that they're very aware in the city about the lack of support for undocumented. I was
Yes.
just wondering how you're handling that issue in terms of the undocumented.
Yes, Gail, and I was going to mention that the Commissioner of Human Rights, Angela Fernandez, spoke about this the other day. And there is a fund, it's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Fund. And it's through the Labor Department. And what she said to us that undocumented, this has been set up for undocumented individuals, people that are on DACA, and what we can ask, I can follow up with her and see if it also covers the H1 visa employees, because that might be able to cover them. If it doesn't, it will be a good thing just to talk to the Labor Department, to talk to her, to Angela Fernandez, who, as you know, is a big advocate of undocumented immigrants, and see if that could also be extended to other undocumented individuals to cover. Because for what she tells me, it does cover those individuals that are on DACA. So it might be extended.
Absolutely. Commissioner, I know that you were trying to figure out something just generally for undocumented. Has anything come to your attention yet, or are you still working on that?
We're still working on that. We know that that is one of the gaps in terms of the programs that we have. Any response will have to be a philanthropic response, similar to how we work with on the workforce side, where we secure funding and then we fund a private organization, a nonprofit, to provide workforce services for the undocumented. we envision working closely with organizations like the Women's Chamber and others who are embedded in immigrant-rich communities, not only to advocate on the federal level for additional technical assistance, but on the philanthropic level and also on the local level as well.
Okay. There's a lot of questions. I've gotten this too, and they're a little bit in the weeds, but something like, what is available for small business owners who have no payroll staff, but they work with independent contractors, which have obviously 1099s? Because a lot of the small businesses in Harlem, for instance, or anywhere where you're doing contracting or you're doing other kinds of work, often are in this situation. So I think they want to know, are they eligible for the SBS or SBA grants that you have, grants and loans that you have described? There's a lot of businesses like that. I don't know who would like to answer that. Kaaryn, do you want to try?
I think the difference, there's kind of the payroll protection plan is designed to protect payroll. So there's an expectation that they do have to have W-2 wage. That's the ideal situation. However, there are plenty of people, especially in New York, that don't have W-2 wages. And so in those cases, the banks have been advised by the SBA to accept profit and loss statements, to accept bank statements, to accept other types of documentation showing that they are paid on a regular basis, and specifically the amount of money they're paid for the highest 2 months of last year.
Okay, so it sounds like when you get into the weeds, people should basically go to your website and figure that out, because there are so many individuals. People also want to know, you know, when they're furloughed, should they go on unemployment versus applying for a loan or a grant? All of those issues are particular to a business. How do you try to answer them? Is it through your websites, or maybe through the SBS business centers? I mean, these are the kinds of, like, where do I go for information? What do you suggest?
I would definitely suggest going to the websites, but a lot of it is also going to depend on just the numbers. What we're seeing for pandemic unemployment, as you know, traditional unemployment is only for a certain group of employees. The federal government included now pandemic unemployment under the CARES Act, which really allows New York State to expand unemployment to those gig workers, to those 1099 miscellaneous workers. And so in that case, I would say your best bet is really to look at the amount that you might be able to get. Right now, it's up to $1,105 a week for unemployment for 39 weeks. And consider that versus applying for the PPPL, which may only be 8 weeks.
Okay, and then the other issue, Commissioner, and also Jessica, help us with the banks. That seems to be a big challenge that I hear about. Some of the bids said that they have a lot of programs and businesses where the banks have not been helpful. Is there anything you can add about how to deal with the banks? And of course, as Andrew brought up, I think also this issue of how much goes towards labor and how much goes towards rent is such a huge issue. It comes up over and over again. But what about the banks?
Yeah. So
oh, go ahead, please, Commissioner.
Sorry. The one thing I would say, just to put things in perspective, and I know everyone is very anxious right now, and you know, just the fact that the federal government signed legislation and then within almost 2 weeks operationalized the largest relief effort. That's the sort of the stuff that we're seeing right now, is the confusion and in some cases, as we've mentioned, the shift in guidance on a daily basis. And I know that's translating to a lot of anxiety and sometimes even anger. But I think what you're going to find is that, you know, banks will come around as guidance settles and people understand. Especially, you know, one of the questions was, do you think we're going to get another stimulus? I think we're going to get not only another, but there's several stimulus ahead because this is, you know, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And nationwide, the SBA has a study that 40% of businesses fail after disaster. There's no way this country can afford 40% of businesses to fail. So I expect to see some smoothing. There's going to be additional lenders that's going to be brought on board to continue to help. So if your bank is unresponsive right now, it's probably because they're trying to figure out how to implement this in the best way. I would encourage you to continue to reach out. If you find another lender that can process your application, your PPP application as quickly as possible, then you need to make a choice on whether or not you want to create a new relationship. But the most important thing is to get an application in. The one thing I would say, and then sorry, I'll turn over to Jessica, is please be mindful, and I should have mentioned this in my opening statement, there's a lot of individuals who are using this opportunity to steal information, to scam business owners into thinking that they can get you ahead of the line. You cannot apply for the PPP unless you go through a lender, and the economic injury disaster loan, you have to apply directly to the SBA. If there's anyone else that's telling you that you should apply to them, please be wary and do not click on any links from anyone that you do not trust.
Okay, good point. Jessica?
I totally agree with everything the commissioner said. I think I would just add to that. So the way that this, the PPP was set up is the money flows through banks. And the idea was the focus of those bank loans, which could be forgivable, was that banks were going to focus on the small businesses that they already had a relationship with. So the thinking was, we already know each other, we work together, that we can get that money out the door very quickly because we have all your information on file. And that really was the thinking. And of course, it's been very difficult for banks because they've been inundated. So they're doing the best that they can. And I think that there's also, the banks, just as the commissioner said, there is guidance that's changing a lot. And I think each bank is trying to deal with this in a different way. So it's a little bit confusing for folks because they're on different timelines. One bank might have started their application process several days ago, and then another bank is on a different timeline. So I think people are confused. What I would say though is two things. One, what the commissioner says is absolutely right, that there is that you need to get an application in as soon as possible. There is a finite amount of money. As we talked about earlier, there has been $350 billion allocated for this program already. As of last Thursday, the last time I heard, already $100 billion had been allocated. So you can imagine what's happened already to bring us here. The federal government is negotiating to enhance this program by another $250 billion, maybe more. Totally agree with the commissioner that we will probably see more there as well. But that really is important. The other thing I would say is, if for whatever reason you have difficulties working with the bank that you do work with, where your accounts are now, you can look for more non-traditional lenders. There are some options out there that are open to working with small businesses where they did not have a previous relationship. So online lenders such as Fundera, that's one example. What we call CDFIs like Axion, those are just some of the examples. But again, I'll maybe Kaaryn wants to weigh in on this as well.
We're promoting as well, and these are valid. They're almost like brokers to a certain extent. You send them your application. They figure out which bank is the right bank to send the loan application to. There are no additional fees that are being charged as a result of this. So it is a valid opportunity, but we do suggest that you work with one of the SBDCs to identify those non-traditional lenders. As I mentioned before, we are SBA resource partners. We're getting information from the SBA all the time, and we are legally required to maintain confidentiality, as well as many other legal requirements that are designed to protect our small business owners.
Okay. The other issue in New York is just rent, and there are questions on both sides. Needless to say, small owners and big owners, but in this case, we're talking about small business owned buildings, and they want to know if they're eligible in terms of the fact that they may not be getting rent from either commercial or residential. So they want to understand what their role is. And then, of course, as Andrew has mentioned and others, and certainly the hair salons and the barbershops and so on, there is a lot of concern about paying the rent. And we're all under the gun, whether it gets 90 days, which of course was the opportunity that the governor gave, but then he's still going to owe the rent. So there's a lot of back and forth. How does that fit into? It's not really an SBS question or an SBA question. It's a how do we recover question. So I don't know who wants to pick up on it, but you certainly know the issue.
Hi, Gale. This is Quenia. We are very aware of that, and what we are now beginning to advocate for is for payment plans. We do need the landlords to. We have the moratorium for the 90 days, but we now need to go back to the state and we need to talk to our elected officials to put in that moratorium that for a payment plan, because there's just no way that our businesses are going to be able to after 90 days come up with $50,000 in rent to pay it all at once. That's just not possible. So that's what we're looking to do right now. It's to at least have a payment plan included.
Makes sense to me. Commissioner, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so one of the things I would tell everyone is to be proactive and contact your creditors. One of the things that I've seen guidance from most of the major banks who also are extend mortgages is that they are, you have to be proactive and contact them. But if you do contact them, they are delaying mortgage payments for 90 days. So if you are a small business owner, and meaning you own property and you have tenants and commercial tenants in your building, that would be my first advice, is to contact all your creditors. Even the Department of Finance has COVID-related relief on their website. You can go to nyc.gov/DOF, where if you cannot pay your property tax, they're waiving the fees and penalties, et cetera. The other thing that I would say is if you are a small business and you have existing SBA loans, you can call your lender because the SBA also has a debt relief program where they will pay your principal and interest for, I believe, 6 months. So those are some of the ways you can relieve some of the financial pressures on your business during this time.
Okay. Andrew, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just two quick things. On the first point, going back to the PPP, I just also think it's clear, this is a huge, massive program like we have never seen before. And there are a lot of kinks to work out. I've been speaking with business owners every day, just a million times a day. I really encourage you to speak with the business owner, the restaurant owner, the bar owner across the street, down the block, and see how they're trying to handle this. The truth is, a lot of the mechanics are not totally clear right now. I'm sure over time we will get more clarity on them, but speak with other people to try to figure out what they're doing, when they're going to take down the money, if they're going to use it right away, how they're going to use it, what happens if you don't use the percentage that allows it to become a forgivable grant, and then all of a sudden you have a loan and it doesn't have to be paid back in 10 years as we originally thought. It needs to be paid back within 2 years. So there's a lot of things that I think are going to change, as the commissioner said as well, and additional stimulus packages. So the biggest advice I can give, and it's not like a concrete do X, Y, Z, it's more like when things are moving so fast and there's so much uncertainty, do whatever you can possibly do to slow things down and don't feel like you're immediately rushed into a decision. Talk with other people, try to figure out what others are doing. And frankly, we're going to have to get through this together, because it is so large in scope that if small businesses are not at the core of this recovery, then it is going to mean really horrific things for our national economy as a whole. So I think everyone gets that. And to get through all of these complex issues, it's going to take some time. So have conversation, because I think that's where some of the best info comes from while we're waiting on like the crystal clear guidance from the different agencies, because sometimes people pass laws and they don't make sense and people are stuck trying to figure out what to do. That's number one. Number two, I just say on the rent issue, speak with your landlords. We've gotten together, both us, the Manhattan Chamber, the other chambers of commerce, the Restaurant Association, the Bid Association, and many others with Rigie, the real estate board, really speaking with one singular voice on this issue. Because if there's no small businesses, it's not going to be good for landlords. But frankly, landlords have mortgages. They're going to have property taxes due in about 2 months. So, if we don't address this in a efficient and systematic way, there could potentially be defaults throughout the system. So I think, one, if we can fix the PPP to allow more money to go to rent, that'll help it. We've also proposed that the city potentially can give a reduction of payroll taxes to landlords if a proportional amount is passed through as a rent deduction. Then also, I mentioned the business interruption insurance, getting some of those insurers to pay. And then finally, the federal government may just have to step in and give direct rent subsidies, because the truth is, if a small business is closed for 2, 3 more months, and then when they reopen, they only have half the business, there's no way they're going to be able to pay back multiple months of missed rent. So what are we going to have? Just a ghost town of vacant storefronts, all these people out of work? No, we can't let it happen. And that's why I think the biggest issue is rent, because it's the fixed cost. Labor is variable. You're closed, you don't have labor, but you need to pay your rent whether you're there or not. And your landlords have the expenses. So if we can get direct payments for rent to the landlords, that is going to address one of the largest pillars that we need to have addressed in the road to this recovery. And again, we need to do it together.
I appreciate that. The other issue, a little bit for anybody who wants to, but certainly Quenia, I'm sure this comes up because it's back to this bank issue with, disparities given limited bank relationships in underserved communities. We've certainly hit this in Harlem already. So I'm just wondering if you have, again, if there is a clear idea about alternatives to the Chases and the Bank of Americas, where you might have some opportunities that may not be clear to the average small business. Any suggestions on this limited bank relationship problem?
Yes, Gale, and you're absolutely right, because we are also encountering it in communities of colors, both African American and Latinos. We've seen in that a lot, and so what we are putting together is a resource guide of other financial institutions and alternative lenders. We're working with Accion. We're working with some of the credit unions as well. And every other organization, non-traditional lenders out there, we're talking to see what they can offer as well. And also not just lenders, but there's several grants that are also out there that we're encouraging people to apply to and that we are helping apply to, which is something like the Verizon Small Business Recovery Fund that it's opening again. They're going through a second cycle right now. The Facebook Small Business Grant Program, our people at True Fund, our friends at True Fund, they also have an emergency fund of 5 million that is opening soon. So we are telling people, don't think that you can only apply to the SBA. If you don't qualify, we're going to work with you to find you other sources of lending, other sources of funds that you can apply to.
That's very helpful, because I think maybe SBS has this, and maybe Columbia Business School, certainly Quenia does, but between Facebook, local initiatives support corporation, also known as LISC, and Verizon,
Yes.
Google. Quenia talked about the New York Presbyterian Hospital and the work that's going on with Hispanic Federation, the Thrive Foundation, and certainly the City Bar Justice. And I do want to give a shout out, as you heard earlier, to Professor Tim Wu at the law school at Columbia, because the students are helping. All of these also, I think, need to be of knowledge to the small businesses that may not have the bank that is an easy access. So we're also concerned about the nonprofit community. They fit into all of these, but they are often smaller and have absolutely no idea what to do. For instance, the art organizations in Harlem are very much looking for support. Those also in Washington Heights and Inwood, just all the uptown arts organizations, because they don't have any. If you're not at the box office, there's not much else you're going to do. It's the box office or nothing. So I think all of the philanthropy is extremely important. Have you found that to be helpful, Commissioner, in terms of some of your support for the small businesses?
Absolutely. We're having some positive conversations. Philanthropic sector is, obviously engaged in looking to address the exact issue we're talking about, the smaller businesses that may not have the banking relationship. And we are also, my team and I have been also advocating through Chuck Schumer's office to include CDFIs in future stimulus package, because we know that it's the CDFIs. We have a network of lenders, and over 65% of our loans that we help package is with the CDFI networks. They work with smaller businesses. They're in our communities of color. And it's important for them to get the capital that they need to participate in these programs. And we've been advocating for that.
Got it. This was a wonderful description. I don't think there's an answer, but I love that people are so specific. This woman is a hair colorist. She has an extra bedroom, which she rented out to Airbnb, which, I have some issues with that, but let it go. And then all of her reservations for Airbnb and for the beauty salon were, of course, canceled. She pays taxes for Airbnb, which I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but okay. So there's no way to get money back for Airbnb. That's a kind of question that only New Yorkers will ask. Does anybody know the answer to that?
Yeah, I think I saw that question. It's very specific, so we would have to understand like how she structured her business. Okay. One of the things that I have seen is that individuals who are entrepreneurial, they're running a business, but most of the income is going into their personal account. So it's, dollars are commingled. And they're not really, even though she's paying the taxes, is it a Schedule C? Like, we need to answer, we need to get more questions. The best thing she can do is all of us, we can, either the SBC or myself, we can help her understand which program she's eligible for. But if there's any legal questions, then I would take advantage of the free legal services so she can understand like what's the best strategy for it.
Okay. Now what I'd love to do is what I did the other day with some of the business improvement districts, which is what about the future? And there are a lot of questions that came from some of the bids, as you can imagine. What are the protocols for opening the city? Would it include what kind of supplies? What kind of masks and sanitizers might we need at restaurants? I don't know the answer. What do we, is that something that FEMA should be of assistance with? And everything along the lines that Andrew's report talks about. So all those many regulations that, to be honest with you, have been a challenge. You have the bad actors, so you have to have the regulations, and thank goodness SBS or others enforce them. But there's a larger issue. How do we get back in business? And when perhaps we could have a sunset, these regulations aren't going to exist for X amount of time, then we will reevaluate. So I'm wondering, maybe Andrew, you could talk about some of what you consider common sense suggestions. Certainly, Jessica, I know you have many people calling your hotline about red tape questions way before even this horrible virus. Outdoor cafes, license renewals, Alt 2 repairs. There are so many of them. Non-life safety regulations. How are we going to think about this? Are we going to be taking our temperature when we walk into a restaurant? Do we want to stay outside more often? Do we want more streets open so that there's an opportunity to distance while we're enjoying the city of New York? And then even just think parking enforcement. All of these issues will be changed, I think. So I'm just wondering, coming back, what are we looking toward? Jessica, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, well, I think the commissioner said it earlier that this is not, you can't just flip the switch and everything opens back up, clearly. This is going to be a gradual ramp up. And from a business perspective, you can think about all the things that go into your business, your staff. If you're a restaurant, obviously you need to have a lot of food on hand. Most businesses are going to have to do like a deep clean. So, I mean, there are a lot of different steps here to get there. I think we're going to see a lot of issues around rehiring. You know, a lot of people had to let employees go and or furlough them. What's interesting here, though, is that the federal government, they enhanced the unemployment insurance benefits so much that it's very generous. And so some people might say, you know what, I'm going to take all 12 weeks of my unemployment insurance and then try to go back to work. So that could, you know, there could be a real impact on businesses because they might not be able to go back to those employees right away who they know and trust. So there's going to be a real ramp up in terms of trying to, you know, make sure that people have the employees they need to open. And then also there are issues around supply chains. So again, a restaurant, and Andrew could talk about this, you know, you've got to make sure that you have the food on hand. And so there's going to be a big issue there because if for whatever reason, the business you used to buy your kale from is not open, you've got to find somebody else to source that. And then that business who is open might be inundated and have to decide which contract they're going to go with. So it's gonna be very difficult. We're gonna see some bumps in the road here to getting us open 100%.
Andrew?
Yeah, so listen, I think you know, everything what Jessica just said, I agree with. You know, part of it's going to depend what the opening looks like. Are we going to go back to a 50% reduced occupancy for an X period of time? And if so, what does that mean for a business if they can only do half of their business, if they even had that many people walking through their doors? But we have I've introduced, you know, many policies, some of which I've discussed to deal with like the immediate crisis at hand. But as you mentioned, Borough President, we did earlier this year release 20 policy ideas for 2020. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need a restaurant rescue and a save nightlife plan that looks at how do we deal with the immediate crisis, things like the PPP, dealing with the direct rent payments, but then restructuring how the city of New York and small businesses relate to each other. And the Commissioner Bishop has done an excellent job. So I really want to make sure that we commend him on listening to the voices of small business owners and trying to then implement policies. But it's also going to take our, you know, members in the city council, the state legislature, and others to look at policies. We've been dealing with delivery. You know, the third-party delivery fees by companies like Grubhub need to be capped at no more than 10%. San Francisco's mayor just implemented a ban this week, or I'm sorry, a 15% cap. The 15 to 30% fees are, you know, unsustainable in a good market. During a crisis, it's unconscionable that people can pay these, you know, would charge these fees. And we're relying on delivery, not only to support small businesses, but also to ensure there's continuity in the food supply system. New Yorkers need food, and many of them are ordering, getting delivery and takeout from restaurants. We've talked about repealing or beginning to repeal more of the commercial rent tax for that businesses south of 96th Street pay, or many of them do. We should do that. Looking at issues with sidewalk cafes, I want to thank the commissioner and the city. They've just waived the most recent sidewalk cafe consent fee, which made a lot of sense because businesses aren't open and able to use their sidewalk cafe. But moving forward, is there a way that we can allow people who open new businesses where a sidewalk cafe previously was to open up under the same conditions as that previous sidewalk cafe until they can go through the community board process, etc. So they can start generating revenue, especially if we're talking about in the summer when people will want to eat outside. Hopefully we have a nice summer, and knowing that people will probably not always want to be crunched together inside immediately post-pandemic, sidewalk cafes may be even more desirable. Ownership of customer data. How can we get restaurants to have ownership of customer data from their third-party delivery companies, from their reservation systems, so they can then communicate directly with their customers and not have to pay a big fee? Are there other areas in the permitting and licensing process that we can help streamline, working with the city to make sure that businesses, you know, can get open up quickly for minor violations that are not an imminent hazard to the health? Can we get more cure periods and warnings? So an inspector comes in and says, business owner, this is a violation. This is why it's a violation, and this is how to correct it. And now you have 60 days. And the city has started to implement some of these things. So I think we just need to think big picture. It's not going to be 1 or 2 policies. It's going to be a real comprehensive program that we're going to have to implement over 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and really make a double down on our commitment to supporting local businesses. And I think this crisis shows all of us how important our small businesses are to the city of New York and how the workers are the backbone. And we need to collectively do better for all of us.
Kenya, when I was talking to the bid in Washington Heights and Inwood, the issues are so challenging. I mean, even internet is not necessarily something that is available at all the small businesses. So I guess, what do you think this small business community looks like after the virus and when we're trying to recover? And what do the businesses need in Washington Heights? I know there's a long list, but how are you kind of approaching it?
Sorry. Okay. Gale, absolutely. It's not business as usual. It's not going to be business as usual. We know that, and it's going to take a while. And what we are looking right now is at the New York Women's Chamber is looking already at programs, at certain things that we can do in terms of readiness for the businesses. And going back, for instance, to our beauty salons in Washington Heights, we're already talking to them and getting them ready. When it opens, make sure that they are booking appointments, not for people to just showing up, but they're the businesses, making sure that to prepare them to still continue with social distance and setting up appointments online, which most of them don't do. Looking for an application that can allow them to do that, and how much that would cost, or developing our own application for them so they can do that, making sure that they all have internet, talking to Spectrum or Verizon to make sure that they are going to facilitate that for the businesses in Washington Heights. So those are the things that we are currently working on to make sure that they're going to be able to open their doors and continue doing business, not as usual, because we know it's not going to be as usual for a while, but at least to allow them to be sustainable and continue in business once they open.
So Kaaryn Simmons, what do you at Columbia and the work that you do in Harlem, first of all, thank you for all of that. And what do you see that the looks like for the businesses in Harlem after this virus? And I think it's great that Columbia is doing this, by the way. I know they helped tremendously. As an example, Columbia helped Harlem when there was a need to have small businesses participate in Whole Foods, and you were there at the business school. So you really made a big difference already. So I just was wondering what you think recovery might look like.
Well, I think I agree with the other panelists that it's likely to be a gradual recovery. That said, what we're moving towards at the SBDC is a focus on that recovery, on resilience, on helping businesses develop resilience plans through examining certain scenarios. For example, step 1 would be that they develop 3 scenarios for the business environment over the next 12 months. The base scenario might be that the virus peaks in next month and it's business as usual in 4 months. We don't know whether or not that's going to happen. An adverse scenario might be that the virus peaks in the next month and there's a gradual recession thereafter for the next 8 months. And then a severely adverse scenario, which would be that this goes on for about 8 months. That would really be step 1 for each business to do. Step 2, we would suggest that they don't waste time trying to figure out the probability of each scenario. The details aren't as important as the actions. Step 3 is for each scenario to evaluate the most powerful actions they can take under 4 headings for each scenario. Number 1 would be their sources of revenue. Number 2 would be cost cutting. Number 3 would be fundraising, whether that's equity, additional loans, credit lines, et cetera. And then number 4 would be some strategic actions, including partnerships, ownership dilution, additional insurance coverage. And then step 4 would be calibration. Once they've actually developed these scenarios, then they reassign these action steps as no regret actions, which means that these are steps that they would take in the baseline no matter what happens. Contingent actions, steps that they would take to limit the impact, the negative impact contingent on the scenario. And then opportunistic actions, which would be steps that they would take to capitalize on upside opportunities. So by thinking this through and developing a plan, not only does it allow for the business owners to have something in paper, set in stone, have some actions, but it allows for some emotional stability during this very difficult time. Business owners are incredible individuals. They have incredible strength and focus. And right now they've been hit with, basically they've been hit pretty hard, not just economically, but also emotionally. And so being able to provide them with some, with a strategy that at least will give them some emotional stability, as well as a real foothold in the real world, I think would be very helpful for any business owner.
Okay, I just want to add to that Columbia University has waived rent for small businesses, your retail tenants. I know you have a lot of them for 2 months, and that's very appreciated. So that's something that also people should know about the university. I want to just also point out there's like over 200 people watching right now, and there'll be many more that will see the YouTube. So you're a very popular panel. I just want to let you know. Thank you for that. And just finally, just final comments, because we have to wrap up in a few minutes. But I think that this, whether it's tourism, which of course we haven't talked about, NYC and Company has a pretty much weekly phone call, because between the small businesses and the tourism, and they often go together, you are the backbone for recovery. There's no question. I think some of you have said it earlier. And I know, Commissioner, are you also thinking that way? How does tourism play a role in terms of recovery and the small business? I'm sure you've been thinking about that.
Yeah, we have. And, to answer the question in terms of what does recovery look like,
Yes.
we're going to take our cues from other countries, and it's going to be gradual. Unfortunately, if you're a small business and you're depending, if you're in terms of service, a certain amount of your clientele are like tourists, I think you're going to have to think about your business strategy for the next year or so, because tourism is going to take a while to come back to the pre-COVID levels. I think, as everyone knows, testing is going to be important. And until individuals feel comfortable that they can go out and not be exposed, or until there's a vaccine, I think you're going to see people take some cautious steps to return to the normalcy of going out, traveling, et cetera. So if you're not online, you need to start thinking about what does the online presence look like. If a bulk of your sales is coming from external tourists, meaning international tourists, how can you pivot your business to domestic tourism? And that means people from the 5 boroughs. So those are some of the things that I think business owners should be thinking about. We, of course, are thinking about, and I think you've seen it on most of the briefings, testing is going to be critical in terms of this recovery. And the quicker and faster and the amount that we can do testing at scale, the better it will be for the economy.
Well, I think we have to wrap up, but between all of your expertise, I can't imagine a better group of people to help the small businesses and the nonprofits as we try to get through their recovery. And so I thank each and every one of you. I certainly thank Commissioner Gregg Bishop, Andrew Rigie from the New York City Hospitality Alliance, Jessica Walker, who is head of the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, Quenia Abreu, who is president of the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, and certainly Kaaryn Simmons, who's director of Columbia University's Harlem SBDC, and who's really the sponsor of tonight's amazing forum. And as somebody who has the whole borough of Manhattan, where we try really hard to work with the small business and nonprofit community, obviously the owners, the banks. It's a very tall challenge, but I do think that the suggestions that you've made tonight, for instance, for what has to happen with the fourth stimulus are incredibly important. But equally important is just making sure that the legal, the insurance, the banks, and all the other actors and stakeholders are part of what you're suggesting. So good night, be safe, be healthy, and thank you very much, Columbia University, for your partnership with a wealth of information for the backbone of our city. Good night.
Thank you. Stay safe,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Be safe,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.